Alright guys, welcome to this page of the notes. What we're going to do is take a look at a couple of word problems dealing with quadratics. I had mentioned earlier that one of the places you may have seen parabolas or quadratics was in physics, and that's because any object that is in free fall or under just the force of gravity, any projectile, is going to take on a parabolic motion. So what we're going to do is a couple of word problems having to do with exactly that. In fact, the first one I give you has to do with throwing a javelin. So here's what we've got. The height of a javelin in feet is modeled by, and I give you a quadratic equation where t is the time in seconds after the javelin is thrown. I want to know how long is this javelin in the air. Hint, how long before it hits the ground. And we'll go ahead and make the ground a height of 0. So here's what we've got. Let's go ahead and make our equation, right, which is h of t is equal to negative 16t squared plus 79t plus 5. Okay, well, here's what I want to know. I want to know how long, right, after you throw the javelin, how long is the javelin in the air? How long before it hits the ground? And I told you, let the ground be 0. So this is going to be 0. In order to go ahead and find out how long the javelin is in the air, I need to solve for t, and solving for t means factoring a quadratic. How do I know it's a quadratic? Well, I have a t squared, and anytime the largest power on the variable is a squared or a 2, you're going to be quadratic. So I think the slide and divide method will work perfectly here. Let's go ahead and slide that guy over, and here's what I wind up with. I wind up with t squared plus 79t. 5 times a negative 16 is going to be a minus 80, and that's all going to be equal to 0. Well, now that I have a leading coefficient of 1, pretty easy from here to find those binomials. I need a t and a t, because t times t gets me t squared. Now, I need two numbers that multiply to a negative 80 and sum to a positive 79. And this one actually is really easy. Positive 80 minus 1. Positive 80 times a negative 1 is a minus 80, and a positive 80 minus 1 gets you a positive 79. But I asked you to solve, not factor. So we'll need to use the zero product property to split these guys up. Here we go. T plus 80 is equal to 0, which means t is equal to a negative 80. Sorry, hang on. I apologize. Hold up. I didn't finish. Sorry. I did not finish my slide and divide method. I remembered to slide. Don't forget to divide. So my original a was a minus 16. And let's go ahead and simplify that. So t, it's going to be minus, let's see, 80 and 16. I believe, oh, actually 80 is divisible by 16. You wind up with a minus 5. And then 1 and 16, there's nothing more I can do than the negative signs cancel each other out. Now I can use the zero product property. Actually, one last step. Move that guy out front, which gives me the zero product property can be used to split these guys up and solve each one. T minus 5 is equal to 0. 16t plus 1 is equal to 0, which means t is equal to 5, and t is equal to negative 1/16. Now, I get two answers. How do I know which one is right? Well, actually, it should be pretty obvious here. Is it possible to throw a javelin and have it be in the air for a negative time? Yeah, obviously that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You cannot have a negative time. So what does that do? Well, that leaves me with just one option. T is equal to 5. So for this particular equation, when throwing that javelin, it is in the air for 5 seconds. Let's go ahead and try another one of these. I got another word problem for you guys right here. This one actually has to do, I believe, with bungee jumping. So here's what we've got. Juan recorded his brother bungee jumping from a height of 1,100 feet. At the time the cord lifted his brother back up, he was 76 feet above the ground. Now, if Juan started recording as soon as his brother fell, how much time elapsed, instead of when, how much time elapsed before? Before the cord snapped back. Well, here's what we've got. I have given you f of t is equal to a negative 16t squared plus c. All right, well, we got to go ahead and plug some stuff in here. Here's what I know. What is the height of his brother when the bungee cord snaps back? Well, he was at a height of 76 feet. Remember, C represents your y-intercept, right? Where do you cross the y-axis? Well, since the y-axis is your height, right? What was the maximum height he started at? Well, he started at 1,100 feet. Now, in order to solve a quadratic, I've got to have it set equal to 0. So let's go ahead and subtract the 76 over to the other side. So what I will wind up with is negative 16t squared plus 1,100 minus 76. I get 1,024. Okay, actually it turns out that this problem is a little bit easier to solve than the other ones, and here's the reason why. I need to solve for t. And this is the only place that t shows up, right? I don't have a linear term, right? I don't have a number multiplied by t. So actually, you guys are going to like this a lot. Here's the way that this one works. Go ahead and simply move the 1,024 to the other side. I got to get that t squared by itself, so divide both sides by negative 16. Well, a negative 1,024 divided by a negative 16 turns out to be 64. Now, to get that t by itself, you guys should remember from Algebra 1, you just simply take the square root of both sides. And we wind up with t is equal to, remember when you take a square root, you got to do plus or minus. And 64 is a perfect square, right? Remember, 8 times 8 gets you 64. So here's what we wind up with. We wind up with plus or minus 8. So I have two answers. T is equal to 8 and t is equal to a negative 8. Now, before we talk about my two answers, again, just real quickly, let me review with you why this one was so much simpler than some of the ones we've seen in the past. And it was because that middle term, that bx, was missing, right? What I wind up with here is a x squared. There is no bx, and this is my c, right? When that middle term, that bx, is missing, really, really easy to solve these guys. You're just going to get that t squared by itself. Take the square root of both sides and you're all set. The question is, which of these is the right answer? Well, obviously, Juan's brother was in the air for 8 seconds because you cannot have a negative time. Can't have a negative time, so we must have been in free fall for 8 seconds. Guys, thanks so much for joining me for this set of notes. Hopefully at this point you feel comfortable with factoring methods, both the GCF, the difference of squares, perfect square trinomials, and factoring general trinomials. In addition, that cool little math trick we learned about the slide and divide method, which makes factoring general trinomials much, much easier. Guys, thanks so much for joining me for this set of videos. I had a great time, and I'll see you the next time around.